I'm Alexis. I'm 22, fresh out of college and feeling like I'm on top of the world. My mom, Sarah, raised me on her own, working her butt off to give me everything I needed. My dad? Never met him, never cared to. At least that's what I always told myself. Graduation day rolls around and I'm pumped beyond belief. My best friend, Jake, is in the crowd, cheering like a lunatic. Mom's in the front row, looking prouder than I've ever seen her. I stride across the stage, grab my diploma, and feel like I'm floating on air. But that's when things start getting weird. I notice this guy in the audience staring at me like he's just seen a ghost. At first, I brush it off, but after the ceremony, he makes a beeline straight for me. "Hey there, sweetheart, remember me?" I'm like, should I? He gives this awkward grin and says, "I'm Tom, your dad." I swear my heart nearly stops. This guy, this total stranger, is claiming to be my long-lost father. Before I can even process it, he goes in for a hug. I backpedal so fast I almost trip over my gown. Whoa, hold on. What the hell? That's when Mom swoops in, looking angrier than I've ever seen her. "Tom, what are you doing here?" Tom throws up his hands, trying to act all innocent. "Sarah, come on. I just want to reconnect with my little girl. Make things right, you know." I'm standing there, feeling like I've stepped into an episode of The Twilight Zone. Jake slides up next to me and whispers, "You okay, Alex? Want me to get rid of this guy?" I shake my head, still trying to wrap my mind around what's happening. Part of me wants to tell Tom to get lost, but another part, I don't know. I'm torn. My whole life, I've wondered about my dad, and now here he is. Tom's still talking, spinning some sob story about how he's changed and wants to be a part of my life. Mom's not buying it, and honestly, I'm not sure I am either. "Look, Tom," I finally managed to say, finding my voice. "This is a lot to process. You can't just show up after 22 years and expect everything to be okay." He nods, looking genuinely sad. "I understand, Alexis. But maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, talk things out." I glance at Mom, who's shaking her head furiously, but curiosity is gnawing at me. What if he really has changed? What if this is my chance to finally have a dad? "I'll think about it," I mutter, not committing to anything. As Tom walks away, I'm left standing there with my diploma in hand, feeling like my world's been turned upside down. Jake puts an arm around me and Mom's looking worried sick. I'm torn between wanting to know more and wishing Tom had never shown up. One thing's for sure, my simple, straightforward life just got a whole lot more complicated, and I have no idea what I'm going to do next. A week after the graduation bombshell, I find myself sitting across from Tom. The place smells like burnt coffee and regret, kind of fitting for this messed up reunion. "So, Alexis, I bet you've got a million questions," Tom said, stirring his coffee like it held all the answers. "Yeah, like where the hell have you been for the past 22 years? I shot back. He sighed, looking genuinely regretful. "Your mom, she kept me away, said she didn't want me in your life." "Nonsense," I snapped. "Mom would never do that." "Look, sweetie, I know it's hard to believe, but—" "Don't call me sweetie. You lost that right when you bailed," I interrupted. Tom held up his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. I made mistakes, I admit it, but I'm here now, trying to make it right." I wanted to stay angry, but something in his eyes made me hesitate. Maybe it was the family I never had, or just plain curiosity, but I felt myself softening. "So, what? You want to play happy families now?" I asked, trying to keep my guard up. "Actually, I'd love for you to meet my family. My wife, Linda, and the kids, they're dying to meet their big sister." That hit me like a ton of bricks. You have other kids?" Tom nodded, pulling out his phone to show me pictures. There he was, arm around a pretty blonde, with 2 little kids greeting at the camera. They looked happy, like the family I never had. "They're cute," I mumbled, trying to ignore the jealousy gnawing at me. "They'd love to meet you. How about dinner tomorrow night?" Before I knew it, I found myself agreeing. The next evening, I found myself in Tom's suburban home, surrounded by the picture-perfect family I'd always dreamed of. Linda hugged me like we were long-lost friends. "Oh, Alexis, we've heard so much about you," Linda exclaimed warmly. "Funny, I can't say the same." I muttered under my breath, but forced a smile anyway. The kids, Tommy and Lily, bombarded me with questions about college and my life. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine that this could be my life too. But then Tom dropped the bomb. So Alexis, I hate to bring up business, but I could really use your help. My help? I asked, caught off guard. Tom launched into a sob story about his failing business, how he was drowning in debt. If I could just get a small investment, say your graduation money, I could turn things around, provide for all of us. I nearly choked on my meatloaf. You want my money? It's a great opportunity, honey. We could be partners, he said, his tone almost too eager. I felt a wave of nausea. Was this what it was all about? Linda looked uncomfortable, but the kids were blissfully oblivious. I need to think about it, I stammered, making excuses to leave. Outside, I immediately called Jake and spilled everything. Slow down, Lex. You're not seriously considering this, are you? I don't know Jake. Maybe he's changed. Maybe this is my chance at a real family. Or maybe he's playing you. Look, do some digging before you do anything stupid, okay? I promised I would, but part of me didn't want to. What if I found something I didn't want to know? But Jake's words nagged at me, so I started digging, and holy hell, did I find dirt. Tom wasn't just a deadbeat dad. He was a con artist with a string of abandoned families and fraud charges across 3 states. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. Staring at the evidence on my laptop, I couldn't believe how easily I'd fallen for his act. And worse, I had no idea how I was going to confront him. I knew I had to expose his whole operation, but first, I needed to confront him face to face. Get him to admit his lies. So I called him up, playing it cool. Hey Tom, can we meet up? I've been thinking about that investment opportunity. Sure thing, princess. How about that diner again? I gritted my teeth at the word princess, but played along. When I got there, Tom was all smiles, probably thinking he had me right where he wanted me. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. So Alexis, have you made a decision? He asked, leaning in eagerly. I slapped down a folder stuffed with all the dirt I'd dug up on him. Yeah, I've decided you're a lying sack of crap. His face went pale. What's this? Your greatest hits, Tom. Fraud, abandoned families, unpaid child support, ring any bells. He reached for the folder, but I yanked it back. Hands off. Now, want to tell me the truth? Tom's face crumpled, and he launched into another sob story about how life had been tough, how he'd made mistakes, but was trying to turn things around. I just wanted to make things right with you, Alexis. Give you the father you never had. Damn him, but I felt a twinge of sympathy. And the money. That was just a bonus, right? He looked ashamed. I admit I need help, but I swear, if you help me out, I'll pay you back. We can have a real relationship. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I found myself agreeing to loan him $10,000. But this is it, Tom. No more after this. He hugged me, tears in his eyes. You won't regret this, sweetie, I promise. But I did. Over the next few weeks, Tom became a constant presence in my life, always needing something, more money, more time, more favors. Alexis, honey, the business is really taking off. If we just had a little more capital. Tom, I told you, I'm tapped out. I can't give you any more. He looked at me with hurt and disappointment. I thought we were building something here, a real father-daughter relationship. I felt terrible but stood my ground. Relationships aren't built on money, Tom. But the guilt gnawed at me. Was I being too hard on him? Maybe he really was trying to change. Then came the day I dropped by his house unannounced. I overheard Tom and Linda arguing in the kitchen. I'm telling you, Linda, that girl's a gold mine. A few more sob stories and we'll have enough to pay off all our debts, and then some. But Tom, she's your daughter, Linda protested. Please, she's just another sucker born every minute, right? I felt like I'd been blindsided by a truck. When I told my mom everything, she sighed. Oh, honey, I was afraid this might happen. Tom's always been a user. It's why I kept him away from you. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, feeling a mix of betrayal and sadness. I wanted to protect you. I guess I should have known you'd have to learn the hard way. Rage boiled up inside me. Well, he's not getting away with it this time. I'm going to make him pay. That's when I called Jake. Hey, remember when you hacked the school's grading system as a project? I've got a real project for you now. Jake was all in. We spent days creating a fake investment scheme, something so tempting Tom wouldn't be able to resist. But I wasn't stopping there. I tracked down contacts for Tom's other kids, the ones he'd abandoned over the years. Turns out, I had a lot of pissed off half-siblings out there. Hey, this is Alexis. You don't know me, but we have something in common. A deadbeat dad named Tom. One by one, they agreed to be part of my plan. Tom had no idea what was coming for him. As I put the finishing touches on our trap, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Was I really going through with this? Then I remembered Tom's words, just another sucker, and my resolve hardened. I called up Tom, putting on my best excited daughter voice. Hey Tom, I've got amazing news. Remember that tech startup my friend told me about? Their stock is about to go public, and I've got an in. We could make millions. Tom's voice practically dripped with greed. That's fantastic, sweetheart. How much do we need to invest? Well, that's the thing, I said. The minimum buy-in is $50,000. I was hoping maybe we could pool our resources. I don't know, Alexis. That's a lot of money, Tom replied, sounding hesitant. I played my trump card. I understand if you can't swing it. I just thought, as partners. But I guess I could ask Mom instead. No, I'll make it work, Tom said quickly. This is our chance, kiddo. We'll be rich. As Tom scrambled to get the cash together, Jake was hard at work, digging deeper into Tom's finances. Holy crap, Lex, this guy's been running scams for decades. I've got evidence of at least 5 other families he's conned. Perfect. Everything was falling into place. I organized a celebration dinner for our new partnership, inviting Linda, the kids, and a few surprise guests. On the night of the dinner, Tom was all smiles, probably already counting his imaginary millions. Linda looked nervous, and the kids were excited for cake. Before we celebrate, I have a surprise, I announced. I've invited some special guests. Tom, I believe you know them. In walked 5 people, my half-siblings. Tom's face went from confusion to panic. What is this, Alexis? What's going on? One by one, they shared their stories, tales of abandonment, broken promises, and stolen money. Linda's face grew more horrified with each revelation. Tom, is this true? All these children. Tom was sweating bullets. Now, honey, I can explain. Oh, I think you've explained enough. I cut him off. I cut in. But wait, there's more. I pulled out the files Jake had compiled, bank statements, fake business records, the whole works. You see, Tom here wasn't planning on investing anything. He was going to take my money and run, just like he's done to all of us. I can't believe this, Linda said, her voice trembling. We're leaving, Tom. Don't try to follow us. Tom lunged for her. Baby, please, it's not what it looks like. But it was too late. As Linda and the kids left, Tom turned on me, his face twisted with rage. You've ruined everything, he yelled. I stood my ground. No, Tom, you ruined everything yourself. I'm just making sure you can't do it to anyone else. What do you want from me? He asked, defeated. Your remaining assets will be distributed among your victims, and you'll sign over my $10,000. As he signed the papers, I felt no joy, only relief that it was finally over. In the aftermath, something unexpected happened. My half-siblings and I started talking, sharing our experiences. We formed a bond, a family of our own choosing. Mom welcomed them with open arms, joking, I always wanted a big family. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson. Blood doesn't make a family. Love, trust, and mutual respect do. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. The story's over now, but I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Tom a second chance or gone straight for revenge? Was I justified in exposing him, or should I have tried harder to build a relationship with my long-lost father? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you would have done in this messed-up family drama. If you enjoyed this wild ride, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that'll make you question everything about family, loyalty, and revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
My name is Alice, and I'm a 33-year-old sales executive at an e-commerce company in Winona. I have a happy family with my husband Scott, our son Oliver, and my mother-in-law Ruth. I had a happy childhood in Philadelphia, but I got married young at 18 while still in college studying business management. My parents, who loved me very much, were worried about me getting married so early, but I was too in love to think about the consequences. My boyfriend seemed perfect, and we rented a place to live. We worked multiple odd jobs to make ends meet since our families cut us off. We had our first child when I was 19. At first, everything was going well, and we managed our parenting duties just fine. But after Oliver was born, things changed. My husband's father died in a car accident, and his mother had a mental breakdown from the shock, later being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Not being allowed to see his parents deeply affected my husband. I supported him, but he eventually quit his job and started gambling and became abusive. I left him when he hit our 5-year-old son. I started over, got my current job, and decided to take a break from relationships to focus on myself and my son. After a year, my best friend invited me to dinner with her and her fiancé. At the restaurant, a handsome man with warm hazel eyes asked if he could sit next to me. It was Scott. We met again at my friend's wedding but barely spoke. At the end of the evening, Scott told me I looked stunning in my gown. We went for a walk, talked about our careers, hobbies, and families, and eventually started dating and got married. Scott has been a loving father to Oliver, who considers him his real dad. Every year on Oliver's birthday, we visit a new city. Even my mother-in-law, Ruth, loved Oliver, but things changed when I got pregnant. One day at Walmart, I'd overheard Ruth telling the cashier to check the fruits carefully because her pregnant daughter-in-law, me, shouldn't get sick. When the cashier congratulated her on her first grandchild, Ruth replied, "It will be my first real grandchild. I have a step-grandson who's 10 because my son married my daughter-in-law when he was 5, but I tried to treat him the same." I realized then that Ruth never truly loved my child with all her heart. Ruth also has a granddaughter from her daughter, whom she adores and spoils with gifts. She spends a lot of time with her granddaughter, and anyone who sees them would think Ruth is the best grandmother ever, but only for her daughter's child. One morning, I woke up to the sound of Scott arguing with his mother. Ruth was furious that Scott didn't want to have another biological child. Scott and I had discussed this the night before, and I advised him not to go through with it. Ruth was angry and threatened to end her life if we didn't have another child. Scott assured her we wouldn't make that decision, but she thought I had influenced him. I didn't want a strained relationship with Ruth. She had been kind before, and I didn't know what had caused the change, but I hoped we could win her over with love. I didn't realize that was a big mistake. We were at a farmhouse for Ruth's birthday, and she had already eaten 2 apples but wanted more. Scott refused, and Oliver playfully whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, Grandma." Oliver whispered to his grandma, "I'll sneak an apple for you upstairs." Scott noticed and asked, "What's going on over there?" But my mother-in-law wasn't amused. She said in a stern voice, "Oliver, it's not good to sneak food because of choking. You should never take food without asking an adult." I stepped in and said, "You're right, but he knows it's not okay. He was just joking with you." We laughed, and I added, "Yes, I'm her apple dealer," but she replied sharply, "That's even worse. He shouldn't learn to play favorites." I was heartbroken when I saw Oliver's sad face. He was just trying to bond with his grandmother, who once loved him so much. Scott couldn't take it and said, "Mom, you know how much he loves you, right? He would never do anything to hurt you." She responded, "Yeah, I'm sure you love him very much." One day, I was cuddling with Oliver when she saw us and exclaimed, "Alice, what are you doing? You're pregnant, and you're crushing your belly. It's not good for the baby. Don't do that before your delivery." I wondered if that was really true but decided to stay quiet to avoid any drama. Things got worse on Oliver's 12th birthday. Scott wanted to throw a big party, and we invited many relatives, colleagues, family friends, and all of Oliver's friends. As we were about to cut the cake, my sister-in-law's daughter came crying to my mother-in-law, who was standing next to me. She claimed that Oliver had hit her and pushed her to the ground. My mother-in-law's anger flared up. I could see she was losing control. Before I could calm her down, she went up to Oliver and slapped him without asking what happened. "You've got a lot of nerve, causing trouble on your birthday. Get out of the house," she yelled. Oliver flinched from the slap and ran out of the house crying. I followed him. After some time, I came back and shouted at her, "What are you doing? It's his birthday. At least hear what he has to say." She snapped back, "Stop siding with your son. I've tolerated him enough. He's forgotten where he comes from." Scott, trying to defend Oliver, said, "Mom, you even know what the fight was about. They argued about you." She told Oliver he's not her real grandson and mocked him until he pushed her. My mother-in-law glared at me. I said, I don't condone his behavior, but I wonder where she learned this from. My mother-in-law was speechless for a moment, and that's when we finally discovered why she treated her grandchildren differently. She said, it's normal for me not to feel the same affection for him because he wasn't born for my son. The children of my biological children will always be dearer to me than your son. I'm going to love your baby more. That's just how most grandmothers feel, even if they don't say it. I couldn't believe my ears. It felt like a shocking revelation, leaving us all stunned. I couldn't understand where she got this old-fashioned idea. Who influenced her to think this way? Her reasoning left us speechless. Oliver later told me that his grandma used to tell his sister that his brother or sister would be mommy and daddy's real child. I asked him what else grandma had said, and he told me she kept reminding him that his sister wasn't really his sister. I noticed my mother-in-law looked away with a hint of guilt. Now Oliver believes he's extra special to us because we don't want him to feel less important, even though his younger sibling is going to be grandma's favorite grandchild. I confronted her. What have you been telling him? She replied, I didn't lie. It's the truth, and he needs to realize it. Unfortunately, Scott was away on a business trip when all this happened. The next day, I told him everything. He said, I'm not surprised at all. She's always been cold towards him, sometimes acting like he doesn't exist. I remember she wouldn't even wish him a simple happy birthday, let alone give him gifts. She never shows any interest in his life, never asks how he's doing in school or about his friends. Scott then tried talking to her. Mom, what you've done is too much. I've accepted Oliver and am raising him as my own, so what difference does it make? She replied, it makes a lot of difference, Scott, and it matters to me. Don't you dare judge me, you can't force me to love your son. That's never going to happen. I don't feel like he's my grandchild, and you'll have to get over it. But Scott was firm. No, Mom, it's you will have to get over not seeing us anymore. We don't need this kind of negativity in our lives, and we definitely don't want our child to experience it. I want you to leave my house right now. Shock and betrayal crossed her face as she stared at her son. Even though I didn't want Scott to live apart from his mother or push her away, I thought it was for the best. We didn't need her in our lives. Being a grandmother to a child who loved her so much was a privilege, and she threw it away by her own choice. Too bad for her. As much as it upset us, we had to make this decision, but she didn't give up. That's not fair. You can't leave your elderly mother on the streets. I can sue you. Scott replied, do whatever you want. You won't see your grandkids anymore. You'll be a bad influence on them. After she said that, I quietly hoped that when she gets older, she wouldn't come crawling back to us for help because our doors would be closed. If that's how you truly feel about me and my son, then you shouldn't be part of my children's lives. I'll make sure you can't poison their minds anymore. Scott packed her things and she went to stay in Florida. Meanwhile, she kept threatening us over the phone, claiming her rights over the house and her grandchildren. She even bad-mouthed me to relatives, blaming me for separating her from her son. Blinded by rage, Scott and I blocked her on everything after sending a text detailing her actions, which we heard from Oliver and his sister. We made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and that she wouldn't see her grandkids until they were much older and could understand the world better, so they wouldn't be swayed by her words. We didn't hear from her for a long time after that. One day we got an anonymous call saying my mother-in-law was admitted to the hospital after breaking her pelvis in the bathroom. There was a chance she might never walk again. Scott panicked when he heard this and rushed to be by her side. No matter how good a father Scott was, he was also her son. Though he was angry at his mother for what she did, he couldn't hide the fact that he loved her. Honey, I think stopping her from seeing the kids is inhumane now. She's old and weak and would want to be with her family in these difficult times. She's just a bit traditional, Scott said, getting emotional. I met her in the hospital, and she told me that being alone in a hospital bed made her realize how unpredictable life is. She admitted she didn't expect karma to hit her this way. Scott then held my hand and said, I think we should bring her back home. I don't have the heart to leave her alone at this time, and I can't keep going back and forth to Florida. I hope you understand. I replied, of course, honey. It pains me to see her like this. No matter what, she is your mother, and you should be there for her right now. It might be difficult with Oliver, but I'll make sure they get along. I believe she's realized she was wrong. A few days later, she was discharged from the hospital, and we brought her home. Things seemed to be going smoothly, and I thought we were finally back together as a happy family. One day, Oliver was playing around the house when he accidentally slipped and hurt his elbow. A few days later, we were unexpectedly visited by officials from the social services department. They said they had received a complaint that my husband and I were neglecting Oliver because we were excitedly awaiting the arrival of our new baby. They even claimed that the injury on Oliver's elbow was a sign of physical abuse. The officials tried to take Oliver away from us. I was terrified and did everything I could to convince them that the complaint was false, but they wouldn't listen. It took my baby away. I was inconsolable. Scott said, "I wonder who might have given them this false information." My mother-in-law suggested we visit the office and personally convince them to let us keep Oliver. After a lot of effort, we finally got him back and proved that the complaint was malicious. But as we prepared to leave, Oliver softly mumbled to me, "Don't leave me with Dad, Mama. I'm scared of him." This shocked me since Oliver had never said anything like that before. Scott was also surprised and tried to hug Oliver, but he pulled away. One day, when I found Oliver alone, I asked him about it. "Oliver loves his mama, doesn't he?" I asked. "Yes, Mama," he replied. "And he never lies to me, so will he answer honestly?" He nodded. "Why are you scared of Daddy, honey? Did he say something?" "No. But Grandma said that once the baby is here, Daddy will throw me out of the house." I was devastated. We had given her another chance to be part of a happy family, and she had ruined it. I realized she could never truly accept us. I also had a strong suspicion about who might have contacted social services with the false complaint, but I decided to talk to Scott first instead of confronting her. However, fate intervened. Ever since her accident, my mother-in-law had been using a wheelchair. That evening, she was preparing coffee when she accidentally spilled hot water on her leg. She screamed, "Help me, Mother of God," and to my surprise, sprang from her wheelchair and rushed to the kitchen to get some ice. Coincidentally, Scott had just returned from work. We both witnessed her walking, revealing that she had been faking her injury to get back into our home. "Mom, you can walk?" Scott asked, shocked. She froze and slowly turned around. Oh, the impact of the hot water must have helped me walk again. What a miracle. But Scott wasn't convinced. "This is sick, Mom. How could you stoop so low? I idolized you as a child, and this is how you repay me? Just because you despise a little child so much." I had never seen Scott so angry and hurt. "I trusted you and wanted to take care of you after what happened, but this is how you pay me back. Get out of my house now. Please, hear me out," she pleaded. "I did this because I want you to realize we can be a happy family without that child. Your child needs a grandparent. Don't deprive her of that happiness. What will you say when she grows up and finds out she has a grandmother you chose to hide from her?" Scott replied, "I'll take care of that. I'm sure when our child is old enough to understand, they'll see that you being around could do no good." He went to pack her belongings and returned with her luggage. You can't be a good mother if you can convince yourself to do and say such horrible things to a young child, even going so far as to brainwash him. We never saw her again after that. A few months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Scott loved both of his children equally and taught them to always stand by the truth. I often reflected on how I had seen mothers. My mother was a modern, progressive woman despite being from the countryside. She rarely talked about marriage and kids, always pushing me to fulfill my career goals. Unfortunately, I didn't value her ideas back then because I wanted to get married so badly. But life eventually shows you the truth. I learned from my mistakes and from the people I met. Scott and his mother were from the same family but different generations. While I couldn't entirely blame her for her outdated beliefs, I think that if she truly loved Scott, she would have found happiness in his happiness. Her comments and behavior towards my son were unreasonable and unfair. Luckily, Oliver didn't grow up to hate or disrespect her, but he always remembered her as his grandmother. I couldn't imagine what would have happened if she had stayed with us longer and continued her manipulative ways. Fortunately, fate intervened, and we were freed from her toxicity and drama once and for all. Hi, I'm Taylor, and I'm 29 years old. My life has been full of challenges, but I wouldn't trade those tough times for anything because they've made me who I am today. To tell my story, I need to start from the very beginning. I was born and raised in a small town called Fairfield, Bawa. Growing up, it was just me and my mom. My dad struggled with alcoholism, and from what my mom told me, he couldn't handle life as an adult. I don't remember much about him because he left when I was only 3 years old, and he's never been part of my life since. After my dad left, my mom had a hard time coping. Occasionally, my grandparents helped us financially, which was a big relief. To support us, my mom worked several shifts at a diner owned by Richard and Eleanor Evans. I went to school with their son, Ethan, who later became my ex-husband. At first, Ethan and I didn't get along, but as we grew older, we became close friends. We started dating when I was 16. However, Eleanor never really approved of our relationship and started distancing herself from my mom. The Evans family wasn't very wealthy either, and although the diner was decent, it wasn't doing great. Ethan used to tell me about his parents' late-night arguments over the struggles of the business. Everything went downhill in the summer of 2016. At that time, I was working at a bookstore, determined to save up for college. I had big dreams, even though I came from a small town. But then my mom had an accident. After fighting for her life in the hospital for a month, she passed away. I was devastated. She was the only family I had aside from my grandparents. I felt completely lost. Ethan became my support during this dark time and helped me through it. I decided to leave my job at the bookstore and took up my mom's position at the diner because it paid better. Sadly, I had to give up on my college dreams and focus on surviving since I was now on my own. About 8 months after my mom passed away, while we were closing up the diner, Ethan surprised me with a marriage proposal. I said yes with all my heart. Our wedding was small and intimate, with only a few people. After we got married, I moved in with him and his parents. However, something felt off. Eleanor had always been concerned with wealth and status. I remember my mom telling me how Eleanor used to talk about wanting the diner to thrive and finding a wealthy, well-educated girl for Ethan. It was surprising that Ethan's parents, especially Eleanor, supported our marriage, but at that time, I was too caught up in my grief to think much about it. Even though Eleanor knew about our relationship, she subtly hinted that Ethan deserved to be with someone of higher status. One day, when the diner was busy, one of Ethan's friends visited. I was in the back doing inventory when I overheard Eleanor talking with Miles and his new wife, Sheila. When I came to the front to say hi, Eleanor quickly sent me away without properly introducing me. Later, Eleanor and I had an interesting conversation. "That was Miles," she said. "He recently got married, huh?" "Oh yes, he married Sheila," she continued. "She's an absolute gem, you know. Fantastic upbringing and all. Both her parents are top-notch doctors in Orlando. She's quite remarkable herself, practicing law. Really, a catch like her is what any man dreams of. Lucky guy, that Miles. I wish my Ethan had that kind of luck." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, you know how it is. Sometimes, I just wish Ethan had found someone who's more put together, like Sheila," Eleanor said. "It's funny how Ethan and Miles grew up liking the same things, and look at their wives now. Quite a contrast, huh?" "You know, Eleanor, it's not always about what society thinks. Ethan and I have a history together, and our love runs deep." "Sweetie, love is just a word sometimes," she replied. "You're young, and I get that you're in love. But my love for Ethan is unconditional, and I believe that's the most precious thing in life. If you claim to love him so much, don't you think he deserves someone even better?" When Eleanor looked at me, she said something that cut deep. "With your mom gone and your dad who disappeared who knows when, if it weren't for Ethan, could you even take care of yourself? What do you have to offer?" I know these words sting, but they're kind of true, don't you think? Eleanor's words hurt me deeply. I tried to brush it off, thinking she just needed time to accept me. But her comments stuck with me, and I couldn't shake the anger I felt. Deep down, I started to wonder if there was some truth in what she said. I was pretty insecure back then, which made her words hurt even more. As for me and Ethan, things weren't as good as they used to be. I started to question if he regretted marrying me. There was a growing distance between us, and at first, I blamed it on the struggles we were having with the diner. But there was definitely something changing between us. It had been over a year and a half since we got married, and during that time, Eleanor occasionally made hurtful remarks about my background. Despite her comments, I tried my best to stay calm and focus on strengthening my relationship with Ethan. However, over time, Eleanor's behavior started to change. Her comments became more frequent and more hurtful, and it was clear that something was wrong. She was acting unpredictably, and then one evening at the dinner table, something unexpected happened that changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. "How was your day, dear?" Eleanor asked. "It was all right," Ethan replied. "Actually, I've been wanting to announce something, Mom and Dad. I've been thinking about this for quite some time now. I think I'm going to invest some of my money in Taylor's education. It's always been her dream to go to college, and the diner isn't doing well anyway." The whole dining room went silent when Ethan said that. I was stunned. He hadn't even talked to me about it beforehand. The tension in the room was thick, and even Eleanor looked shocked. It was a sweet gesture, but I wished he had given me a heads up before dinner. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," Eleanor said, clearly upset. "Mom, please don't overreact," Ethan responded. "Richard, why aren't you saying anything? You can't seriously be considering this." Eleanor snapped. "Let's hear Ethan out, dear," Richard said calmly. "Ethan and I haven't discussed this," I added, trying to keep the peace. "Ethan, I think it might be a good idea if we talk about this one-on-one first." But before I could say anything else, Eleanor cut me off. "No, you stop. You don't get to have a say in this. We took your mother in at the diner out of pity after your alcoholic dad abandoned you. She was a single woman with an 8-year-old child and no one to help her. You and your mother were nothing more than a sympathy project. We generously offered her a place at our diner for so long, and now you've managed to worm your way into our house. My son deserved someone better than you, someone from a well-off family. He should be living a suburban life of luxury and sophistication, but instead, you're with him now, living under our roof, leeching off my son's success. Honey, please hear me out," Ethan pleaded as I started to get up from the table. "Don't leave." "I'm sorry, but I've had enough," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. After enduring Eleanor's brutal and painful remarks for so long, I couldn't hold back the tears any longer, despite trying to keep my composure. I excused myself from the dining table and practically ran into the kitchen to get some space. I hovered near the kitchen door, hoping to catch parts of the conversation going on at the table. Through the muffled voices, I heard Ethan's voice rise above the others. "Mom, can't you see what you're doing? I know Taylor isn't your first choice for me. Maybe it started as just a crush, or maybe I felt sorry for her, but she lost her mom and needed someone. Maybe I messed up and confused sympathy with love, but I just can't leave her. She has no one else. I'll admit, our romantic connection has faded, and I've drifted apart from that, but Taylor's in a tough spot. She has nowhere else to go. I've been thinking about paying for her college, and maybe after that, we can figure out the divorce. But I can't just kick her out like that. We've been together since we were 16, you know." "Oh my God, Ethan," I heard Eleanor respond, her voice filled with frustration. "I've seen this coming from the start. Taylor is nothing but trouble. You've let your emotions get the best of you. Pity isn't the foundation for a lasting relationship. You've grown, and it's time to think about your own future. Her problems shouldn't be your burden. You can't fix her life if it's going to ruin yours." I was completely floored by what I had just heard. Ethan had been with me out of pity. My heart shattered into a million pieces. Our whole marriage felt like a sham. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. I had to give him what he seemed to want, a divorce. I made a bold choice to follow my dreams, and it led me straight to Los Angeles. I figured I had nothing to lose. I rented a small one-room apartment, living on a basic mattress, and relied on my writing experience to find work. I aimed to get a job at a restaurant and start this new chapter in LA. After some hustling, I landed a job at a restaurant. I got into the rhythm of living paycheck to paycheck, but I didn't let that slow me down. In a few months, I got a promotion to work directly under the restaurant manager. Life started to improve. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. My hard work and skills were finally being recognized. I eventually moved into the world of high-end hotel management, working at places that catered to celebrities. As my career grew, so did my lifestyle. I traded my simple apartment for a luxurious house. After the heartbreak with Ethan, I had pretty much given up on love, but then Harry walked into my life, We met at my friend Alyssa's extravagant birthday party on a yacht. I was still getting used to all the fancy stuff rich people do. Harry had this magnetism about him, and he made me feel comfortable right away. He treated me with genuine respect and made me feel like I belonged in his world. It turns out he was a big deal in the LA finance scene, with a wealthy family and all that. I was blown away to find out that his dad, Mr. Johnson, was a billionaire. Fast forward to our wedding day, we tied the knot at a stunning vineyard in Los Angeles. Just last month, we celebrated our first anniversary, which felt like a big deal. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about Ethan and his family during all this time. While I was out here hustling to make a name for myself, Eleanor's words haunted me. I had this constant urge to prove to her that I could be successful on my own terms, and that it was her son who had let me down. Life indeed surprises us in countless ways, and it certainly surprised me last weekend when my father-in-law hosted a party at their sprawling mansion in Bel Air. While I was mingling, my eyes locked onto someone across the room, and my heart started racing. There, serving food, was an elderly woman who looked just like Eleanor. My mind struggled to comprehend the possibility of her being there. I quickly excused myself from the company to process what I was seeing. I made my way over to the lady, and yes, it was her, Eleanor. "Hey, Eleanor," I greeted her. "Hey, stranger. It's been a while," she responded, seemingly unfazed. "It has. What are you doing here?" "Doing the whole catering thing," she replied with a hint of pride. "Can you believe it? Rubbing shoulders with all these high-profile folks." "Well, congrats on that," I said, trying to maintain a polite tone. "Thanks, but honestly, you've got a part in this. We might not have come this far if we were still dealing with some holdbacks." Pretty bold statement. I've always wanted what's best for the family. Sure thing. We shut down the old diner and leaped into the catering world. Ethan came up with the idea, and surprise, it's turning out to be pretty profitable. Now we're crisscrossing the state, catering to all sorts of events and fancy clients. We were in Glendale a few nights ago when Mr. Johnson asked us to cater for his party. You know, I never wished you any ill will, so I genuinely hope you're doing well. How's Ethan? Better than he used to be. Oh, and here's the kicker. Ethan has moved on with his love life and snagged himself a new girlfriend. Usually he accompanies me on these trips, but this time he's off to Hawaii with her. She's a real delight to have around, gorgeous like a living doll. She just seems perfect for my kid. Good for him, I replied, my voice calm. By the way, Eleanor, what are you doing here? Who called you here? I'm sorry, but you're too poor to be here. You haven't changed at all, have you? Forget about me, look at you, still trying to get your way around the rich. Old habits die hard, sweetheart. He'll always be that girl from Fairfield, the one with nothing to offer. I'm here because I belong here, just like anyone else. No one called me. I came here with Harry, my husband, and also Mr. Johnson's son. Eleanor's face displayed a look of shock, but she quickly composed herself, maintaining her usual mean demeanor. Don't think he'll stick around forever. People like you never stay for long. Eventually he'll see that he deserves someone better, someone from his world. Harry is just naive. You have no idea how far I've come. I have a name in the hotel industry now, and never mind, you know that your wealth doesn't define you, just as my past doesn't define me. I've worked hard to build a life for myself, and I'm proud of where I stand today. Well, aren't you full of yourself, she sneered. You may have managed to climb the ladder, but you'll never truly fit in with people like us. You'll always be an outsider. You know, I used to think that way too. I responded, my voice steady, but I've learned that truly belonging doesn't come from material possessions or social status. You've certainly grown bold, haven't you? Well, we'll see how long that lasts. I've seen it all before. It's good that Ethan got rid of you. If you want to delude yourself, go ahead, but don't expect me to change my mind about you. I was all set to deal with Eleanor and show her I meant business, but suddenly the sound of a spoon hitting a glass stole the spotlight. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention, please. Tonight I stand before you with a lot of pride and joy in my heart. It is a momentous occasion as I pass on the torch of responsibility to the next generation, my son Harry. I gave Harry a quick look, and our eyes connected for a second. I smiled at him, and I'm proud of you smile. His dad was just handing him an entire business, making it his day to remember. It was his special day, and I was determined not to let anyone from my past mess with the great thing I had going on at the moment. Taylor, my dear daughter-in-law, you have shown us the true meaning of strength and resilience. From the very moment I met Taylor, I was captivated by her tenacity, dedication, and unwavering commitment to her dreams. Her journey from a small town to the chaotic city of Los Angeles has impressed me. She is a remarkable young woman who has not only touched my son's heart, but also brought a lot of joy into our lives. Tonight we celebrate not just the passing of the torch to my son Harry, but also the recognition of Taylor's extraordinary talent and potential. It is with absolute delight that I announce that Taylor will be taking charge alongside Harry as a key leader in our business. It was totally my I made it moment to have Mr. Johnson, the big shot behind this business, acknowledge me and hand over this huge responsibility. I can't even put into words how much that meant. With everyone clapping and cheering, Harry made his way to me and leaned in, giving me a sweet little peck on the cheek. You deserve this as much as I do. I love you, baby. Cheers to us. I love you too, I replied, feeling an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. In the midst of all the excitement, I hadn't forgotten the conversation I was having with Eleanor earlier. Now with this huge announcement, I was itching to see her reaction and maybe just drop it on her. I scanned the room and spotted Eleanor, still standing there, somewhat taken aback. Hey, I said as I approached her. I just swung by to soak up this moment, you know, the one where I get to show you how off the mark you were about me. Oh, the golden days of your doubt. Remember when you thought I'd crash and burn in this world? Like a hot minute ago. I had valid concerns, okay? I mean, how could he? No, you got it all wrong. Well, those words just got upgraded to my achievements, co-running this business with Harry, living the life I've always wanted. I didn't level up for your approval, but I can't deny that it's pretty satisfying watching you squirm. At that moment, a hint of satisfaction crept over me because it seemed like karma was doing its thing perfectly. With a little smug smile, I looked into her eyes, feeling a boost of confidence. Revenge might not be the noblest thing, but seeing Eleanor's jealousy written all over her face was a pretty satisfying win. It's been about a week since the big bash. I'm pretty sure Ethan's back from his vacation by now. Eleanor must have filled him in on the whole deal too. The feeling of proving myself to those who once doubted me, I can't even put it into words. It's a reminder that you never know what someone's really made of, and that even the biggest skeptics can be proven wrong. With Harry right there beside me, we're juggling not just one but two businesses, living life to the fullest, rich in every sense of the word. My dream house was finally finished, and I was so excited about the new life we were about to start. As I looked around our new home, I imagined all the wonderful things that were ahead of us. There were so many changes I wanted to make, and I was eager to begin. Just then, my in-laws showed up unexpectedly. You're such an unreasonable daughter-in-law, they said. We're going to live here from now on, so you need to move your parents somewhere else. I was shocked and confused. I asked my husband what was going on, but he just sighed and said, "That's how it is. I'll tell your parents." Before I could say anything else, my in-laws walked into the house. I took a deep breath and calmly said, "Do you understand whose house this is?" Let me introduce myself. My name is Donna. I'm 35 years old, and I work for a company. I've been married to James for 5 years, and we have a 4-year-old son named Adam. Adam acts very mature for his age because he's been raised around adults. Raising a child can be tough, but spending time with my son makes me happy. However, I do have one worry. My elderly parents are struggling with leg and back pain. After thinking about it a lot, I talked to my husband about the possibility of having my parents live with us. That's a serious concern, he said. It would be a good way to repay them for everything they've done for you. If it makes you feel better, Donna, I don't see any problem with it. Really? That's great. Thank you, James, I replied. I was so grateful to have such a caring husband who agreed right away. So I started planning for my parents to live with us. But it wasn't easy. My parents' house is far from the city, which would make commuting to work difficult. We couldn't use a car to commute, so living there wasn't a good option. At the time, we were living in a small rental apartment that was only big enough for the 3 of us. It wasn't practical to have my parents move in with us there. After thinking it over, I came up with an idea. James, I've been thinking, how about we build a new, bigger house? Maybe now is the time to take a bold step. James agreed right away. That's a great idea. Let's build a comfortable house and live there together. With his approval, we started planning for the new house. First, we talked to my parents. They were hesitant at first, saying they didn't want to be a burden. But I explained that as Adam grows, our current home would eventually be too small, so it made sense to build a new house now. Once they understood, they finally agreed, and I felt relieved. After that, my husband and I were busy visiting real estate agents. We wanted a house near a hospital for my parents and close to a train station for work. We also needed a barrier-free environment because of my parents' mobility issues. My husband and I worked together to find the perfect location and design for our new home. Finally, all the preparations were done, and we placed the order with the contractors. It took a lot of effort and time, but we were proud of what we had accomplished. Now, we just had to wait for the house to be completed. Thinking about our new home made me excited and motivated me at work. During those exciting days, my in-laws heard about our plans and often contacted us. One day, my mother-in-law called and said, "I heard from James that you're building a new house. Is that true?" "Yes, that's right," I replied. "It's scheduled to be finished by the end of the year." "That's exciting. James has grown up so well, and we're so happy. We'd love to hear more about the new house. If you have time, please visit us." We had been so busy that we hadn't visited my husband's parents in a while, so we decided to go see them that weekend. When we arrived, they welcomed us warmly. Building a house is hard work, but it's also a lot of fun. Having your own home is a dream come true. "Congratulations," my father-in-law said, as happy as if it were his own achievement. I was touched and smiled. "Thank you. It was tough, but we're really excited about it. I can't wait for it to be finished, though I'm a bit worried about possible mistakes. Still, I'm thrilled about our new house." We were always excited and talked happily about it. Suddenly, my mother-in-law clapped her hands and asked, "By the way, what's the layout like?" I showed her the floor plan on my smartphone. "Oh, it's quite a big house, isn't it?" My in-laws commented, "Isn't it too many rooms for just the two of you?" We're planning to live with Donna's parents, and we also wanted extra space in case we have another child in the future, my husband explained. Surprised, my in-laws asked, "You're going to live with Donna's parents?" "Yes, that's right," my husband replied. "Donna's parents have been getting weaker, so we decided to live together. That's why we're building a new house." I noticed a change in my in-laws' attitude as James explained. Later, I realized this topic might not be very appealing to them, so I tried to steer the conversation in another direction. "By the way, how have you both been feeling lately? Any changes?" "No, not really," they replied. "Everything's about the same as the last time we met." But soon enough, the conversation returned to the new house. "I want to know more about it," my mother-in-law asked. "Which room will Donna's parents use?" "We're thinking about this area here," James answered, unaware of the tension. However, when we talked about living with my parents, my in-laws seemed unhappy. It felt like they weren't pleased with us prioritizing my parents. Although I felt a bit unsure, I knew that the main reason for building the house was to care for my parents. I hoped my in-laws would understand that eventually, but it was clear they weren't too happy. As time passed, the house slowly neared completion. Every time I visited the construction site, I eagerly looked forward to the day it would be done, while also paying close attention to the details. My parents visited the site several times too, and I could see how happy they were. It made me realize how rewarding it was to do something for my family. However, there was one thing that bothered me. Recently, James had been spending a lot of time with his parents, visiting them every weekend. "James, are you going to your parents' house this weekend too?" I asked. "Yes, I am," he replied. "You've been visiting more often recently," I noted. "I'm trying to be a good son like you, Donna. Now that our new house preparations have settled down, I should visit them during the holidays." "That's nice, you're very kind, James. Maybe I should come along with you," I offered. I was concerned that my in-laws might feel neglected, and I worried about their health. I thought I could help, instead of leaving everything to my husband, but he shook his head. "I'm enough by myself," he said, and went to his parents' house alone. I told him that if he needed any help, I would join him, and I believed he would call me someday. Finally, our new house was completed, and moving day arrived. We packed our things into the car and headed to our new home. The new house was even more beautiful and grand than I had imagined. I was so moved that I gasped. The new house of my dreams was finally completed, and I was thrilled about the new life we were about to start. As I looked over our new home, I imagined our future. I was excited about all the new things I wanted to do. I pictured my family having barbecues in the spacious garden, with my son and husband playing there. My parents were stuck in traffic and would take a while to arrive. "You can go ahead and wait inside," James suggested, but I wanted to enter the house together with them. I was about to say, "No, I'll wait here," when suddenly my in-laws arrived. I was surprised. Why were they visiting? They got out of the car with big smiles. "This house is really magnificent," they said. "It's something to be proud of." "That's right. We planned it together with Donna," my husband replied cheerfully. "Donna has great taste," they added, and I thanked them. Then they started unloading heavy bags from their car. Surprised, I asked, "What are these bags for? What are you doing?" My in-laws gave a shocking reply. "Of course, we're bringing these bags into the new house." "What?" I was stunned. My mother-in-law sighed and said, "What an unreasonable daughter-in-law. We're going to live here from now on, so move your parents somewhere else." I was in shock. "What are you saying?" I asked, but my mother-in-law just shook her head and crossed her arms. "A daughter-in-law should respect her husband's family. It's only natural for us to live in this new house. Now hurry up and contact your parents. We need to put our luggage down," she demanded. Struggling to understand, I looked at my husband for help, but he just sighed and said, "That's the reality. I'll tell your parents." "Wait a minute. What are you talking about? We built this house to live with my parents. Please don't be so selfish," I protested. My husband sighed again. "You still don't understand. You should just serve me. Your parents will manage somewhere else." I clenched my fists in anger. My husband had clearly been influenced by his parents. Maybe his true nature was only now becoming apparent. "Stop standing there and help with the bags," his parents ordered, confidently entering the house, even though I, the owner, hadn't stepped inside yet. Their behavior infuriated me. "This place is wonderful. The decorations are beautiful and luxurious," my in-laws said as they inspected every corner of the house with joy. My anger reached its peak. I coldly asked, "Do you understand whose house this is?" In a good mood, my in-laws turned to face me. "Whose house? It's James's house, of course. You think it's shared property between husband and wife? How audacious of you to claim this house for yourself when you're being taken care of by James." Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law criticized me harshly, not giving me a chance to speak. It became clear that they didn't know about our financial situation. It seemed James hadn't explained anything to them. It's unnatural for a house built by James to be shared with his wife. Such a presumptuous daughter-in-law is rare. I pity James for having a wife and in-laws like this. They continued to criticize me based on their misunderstanding. Finally, I reached my limit. I stared at my husband and his parents. "I understand your point, but if you all really intend to live here, then James will need to reimburse me for my investment in this house." At that, my in-laws tilted their heads in confusion. "How much money did you actually contribute? The amount you're talking about must be trivial." "Why make such a big deal out of it?" they said, laughing. I glanced at my husband, who remained silent, his mouth firmly shut. Filled with anger, I blurted out, "Why are you silent? It's unbelievable that you would hide something so important." Pressed, my husband fidgeted and avoided my gaze. At that moment, my mother-in-law demanded, "What are you trying to say?" My husband looked pale with fear, and I realized I couldn't expect an explanation from him. I decided to clarify myself. In fact, the funds for purchasing this house were all paid from my savings. Therefore, this house is technically mine. As I revealed this, I saw my husband's pale face. It was as if he had held his breath. I continued, "If you want to live here, you need to repay the $330,000 used to build this house immediately." My declaration shocked my in-laws, leaving them speechless. They turned to my husband, pressing him in a panic. "James, is that true? Is Donna really the owner of this house?" Faced with their questions, my husband had no choice but to admit the truth. "Actually, Donna purchased this house. She is very capable and already holds a managerial position. Her salary is significantly higher than mine." But James, you've been working at your current job for a long time, right? You graduated from a prestigious university. You should be earning a high salary, my in-laws insisted. My husband, having a high sense of pride, must have been spinning the story to suit himself. However, even he couldn't hide his disturbance under the relentless questioning from his parents. Actually, I recently made a big mistake. I almost got fired, and my salary dropped to the level of a new graduate, he finally confessed. Shocked by this revelation, his parents were left speechless. My mother-in-law murmured softly, "I can't believe James would end up like this." My in-laws quickly ran over to me, their previous rude behavior seeming like a lie, and apologized profusely. "Donna, we are truly sorry for what we said earlier," they pleaded. "Please forgive us. Could you possibly allow us to stay here?" "What?" I looked at them sternly as they both pleaded at once. Seeing this, my husband also became desperate and pleaded, "Please, it was wrong of me not to explain. Can you forgive us and allow us to live here?" Responding with a calm voice, I said, "No matter what you say now, I cannot forgive you. This house was purchased to live with my parents. If that cannot be fulfilled, there was no point in buying it. If you insist on staying here, you must immediately pay $330,000. How can we possibly come up with such a huge sum?" My in-laws responded. "Then you must leave," I stated firmly. When I refused, my in-laws began to cry and clung to me. "Please don't say such things. We've sold our home and have nowhere else to go. Donna, please forgive us. Please allow us to live here with your parents too." Unbelievable, I thought. A household where a couple lives with both sets of parents is unheard of. No matter the reason, it's impossible. If you sold your house, you should use the proceeds to find another place to live. As I declared this, they began to cry simultaneously. My father-in-law pleaded with a trembling voice, "To tell the truth, I've recently made huge debts through investments and gambling. We've used up the proceeds from the sold house and the retirement money, and now we have absolutely nothing left. We're retired, can't find work, and my wife has never worked outside the home. You're all we have left, Donna." Their expectations were clear, but this situation stemmed entirely from my father-in-law's actions and had nothing to do with me. "You should rely on your proud son. I have no obligation to support you financially, so unfortunately, I cannot help. However, we are legally a family, remember that. Regrettably, it is impossible to continue living with disrespectful parents and a husband who neither prevents illegal occupation of my property nor stops demanding it. Therefore, I have decided to divorce James." At my firm declaration, my husband weakly pleaded, "Wait a minute, divorce isn't something you can just decide like that. Please don't say such things, Donna. I'm sorry, but I've reached my limit. Please leave this house immediately." Faced with the possibility of divorce, my husband was clearly shaken and along with his parents repeatedly pleaded, but my decision was firm. "I cannot tolerate them staying in our house without permission for an extended period. If you continue to stay, I will call the police." My firm declaration made my in-laws choose to leave the house hastily. Nevertheless, my husband argued, "Legally, I am still your husband and have a right to reside here." But I could not accept his claim. "If you continue to stay here, I am prepared to take legal action and have you removed. Are you really okay with that?" During this conversation, our son, who had been napping, woke up and entered the room. Then he unexpectedly said, "If it goes to court, Dad will be in a really tough situation." Hearing our son's innocent remark, my husband must have felt even more anxiety and desperation. Already at risk of being fired due to mistakes at work, the potential of getting involved in a legal battle greatly increased his chances of dismissal. Quickly grasping this harsh reality, my husband, with a pained expression, hurriedly gathered his belongings and quietly left the house. Just after that, my parents arrived for a visit. Noticing that my husband was nowhere to be seen, they were initially shocked. As I explained everything that had happened, they gradually showed warm smiles and expressed their gratitude. "You've stood up so strongly for yourself. Thank you. We're proud of you. You are a wonderful daughter," they said. Hearing their words, I felt a release from the anxiety I had been carrying for a long time and finally regained peace of mind. I had hoped that my husband would understand and accept the situation, but that was a wish unfulfilled. Perhaps escaping from a family that belittled me before things escalated further was actually a stroke of good fortune. The in-laws who had insulted me called repeatedly a week after I drove them out, but I decided not to respond to any of their attempts. According to some information, after losing their home, my in-laws are barely surviving in a poor quality apartment. Eventually, my relationship with my husband officially ended, and the divorce was finalized. Due to his workplace failures, he was transferred to a different region and is now living a challenging new life. Meanwhile, every time I see my parents enjoying the sunshine in the spacious garden of our new home, I feel truly happy. Although things didn't turn out as planned, we are leading a peaceful and joyful life in this beautiful house. As a single mother starting a new life, I am convinced that raising my child in this stress-free environment is far better than the co-parenting I previously endured with my ex-husband. I am committed to doing everything I can until the day my son grows into a fine adult. Why are you getting in my way? Since I said I'm going to live here, I'll take everything unnecessary outside and quickly bring in my stuff. My mother-in-law announced loudly outside the store I manage. My husband Sean, who was standing next to her, just laughed. At that moment, a black car pulled up. My name is Shelley, and I'm 31 years old. Sean and I got married 4 years ago. His father passed away when Sean was young, so his mother raised him alone. Sean graduated from university and got a job at a local manufacturing company. He's kind-hearted and soft-spoken, but he's easily influenced by others, which makes it hard for him to advance in his career. I also graduated from university and initially worked at a cosmetics company, but I never gave up on my dream of becoming an esthetician. While working, I attended beauty school at night and trained at a top esthetician shop. I pursued this dream because I was always self-conscious about the shape of my face. I had received hurtful comments about it since I was young. However, in high school, while walking with friends, I got a free trial coupon for an aesthetic treatment and decided to try it that day. The shop was white and clean, with a comforting scent, and a very beautiful esthetician took care of me. I was immediately drawn to the charm of the place. She listened to my concerns and gave me a genuine treatment, even though it was free. I'll never forget the surprise I felt when I looked in the mirror afterward. She said, "It's our job to solve problems and bring out people's confidence." Her words moved me, and I felt tears well up. This experience made me want to help others, leading me to choose this profession. Sean and I met through a friend's introduction, and after several dates, we grew closer and got married after about 2 years of dating. Sean is gentle but not very assertive, which balanced well with my strong personality, at least until his mother came into the picture. When we talked about getting married, his mother repeatedly asked us to live with her at her home in the suburbs, which was inconvenient for commuting. We managed to convince her otherwise and started our married life alone. Then a year ago, I quit my job and opened my own aesthetic salon, a dream I had for many years. Although I used to juggle part-time jobs, starting my own business made me much busier than before, leading to more frequent disagreements in the life Sean and I shared. Still, we made efforts to maintain our bond as a couple by having breakfast together and letting each other know when we would be home. One evening, as I returned home late, Sean, who would usually be asleep by then, was waiting for me with a serious expression. "Shelley, there's something my mother told me," he began. He revealed that his mother had accumulated debts, and it had reached the point where she had to sell the family home. I was shocked. His mother had always been reckless with money and lived without a plan. He further explained that his mother had used the money his father had saved for Sean's tuition, forcing Sean to rely on scholarships for university. This behavior was why I had refused to live with her when we were newly married. The sale of her house meant she would have nowhere to live, which made me feel uneasy. "Can we let my mother live with us?" Sean asked, but I quickly cut him off. "It's impossible. We absolutely cannot live together. I don't mean to speak ill of your mother, but she would end up dipping into our living expenses. Isn't your mother still working? She should rent an apartment with her income and live alone." I strongly appealed to Sean, desperately wanting to avoid living together. It hurt to criticize his mother, but it was necessary. "No, actually, there are debts that can't be covered even by selling the family home, so I suggested cutting expenses to allocate more towards debt repayment," Sean replied. "You can't just decide that," I responded. "I understand what you're saying, Shelley. I take back what I said earlier, and I'll talk to her about living on her own," he said, but I was skeptical. Sean always seems to accept my opinion when he's with me, but he becomes speechless in front of his mother. I was deeply anxious that his mother might eventually force us into living together. Sure enough, the next day, I got a call from Sean's mother. "Shelley, this is terrible. Do you really hate the idea of living with me that much? I held back when you two first got married, thinking you were newlyweds, but this time it's unavoidable. I'm about to lose my home. Even if we're not blood-related, what kind of cruel daughter-in-law are you to abandon a mother?" My mother-in-law harshly criticized me. "I'm sorry, but I have to oppose this. Our house is too small for even the two of us, so we can't provide another room." I calmly explained to her, but my calmness only made her angrier. "It's unacceptable for a wife to go against her husband's words. I will retrain you to be a proper wife, so be prepared," she said and abruptly hung up the phone. This was another reason I refused to live together. I've always struggled with her domineering personality. It's frustrating how Sean gets swept up in her assertiveness and becomes submissive. The next day, even though it was early morning, my mother-in-law showed up at our house. "Sean, Shelley, are you there? I've come to talk, so open up quickly," she called out loudly without using the intercom and banged on the door. Worried about disturbing the neighbors, I quickly let her inside, but she ignored me and went straight to wake Sean, who was still asleep. "I have to move out of that house by next week. Don't worry about what this daughter-in-law says, quickly start preparing for my sake," she said, hitting Sean on the back. I wondered how a man over 30 could be treated like this by his mother, but I couldn't just stand by and watch. "Mother, please calm down a bit," I intervened, to which she directed a sharp glare at me. "How can I calm down? This situation is your fault. It's because of your selfishness," she snapped. Tension filled the air between us. Sean, seeing this, said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll figure something out, just wait a little longer," and suddenly began to apologize earnestly. Seeing him like this left me dumbfounded. However, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat satisfied with his response. "You have 1 more week. Make sure you sort it out by then," she said, and then left. "Sean, why do you act so helplessly, and what exactly do you plan to do?" I asked as I pressed him. Sean visibly became angry. "Be quiet, Shelley. Can't you show a bit more understanding? Why am I always the one being blamed?" he shouted and then covered his head with a blanket. Sean raising his voice was unheard of, and I began to feel anxious that something unusual might happen this time. My premonition was right. The situation worsened the next week. As set by my mother-in-law, she and Sean took an unexpected action. That day, I visited the bank in the morning for work and planned to head to the store in the afternoon. The store opens in the afternoon, so I had left the preparations to my staff. However, before opening, I received a call from my staff telling me there was a serious issue at the store and that I needed to come quickly. I changed my plans and hurried to the store. To my surprise, when I arrived, my mother-in-law and Sean were confidently walking around inside. "What are you doing? Customers will be arriving soon, so please leave," I said. There were several beds in the store, separated by partitions, but my mother-in-law was lying on the beds and measuring them. "What are you talking about? This is a viewing, isn't it? There are beds here and this room is perfect for me. I don't need all of it, but I will use at least half. It's equipped for privacy, and it's discreet, so no worries. But this bed is a bit small. I'll use 2 of them," she said while arranging 2 beds together by herself. Incredibly, Sean was smiling and agreeing with her plan. "Sean, what is this? Moving here is not something I can allow. If this is a joke, stop it right now," I appealed, but I was confused by the unexpected actions of my mother-in-law and Sean. If it becomes public that someone is actually living in the esthetician store, it could damage its reputation. My store has been highly rated for its emphasis on hygiene, and many customers have supported us because of this. However, I couldn't let their selfish actions ruin the store's reputation. "Please stop this and leave. We're about to open, and we have many reservations. If you stay here, I'll call the police," I shouted. Hearing the word police, my mother-in-law and Sean looked a bit worried. "Let's leave it for today, but I'm definitely planning to live here," she said as she left with Sean. I apologized to my staff and quickly tidied up the store. I expected my mother-in-law to be unreasonable, but I was shocked that Sean went along with it. From the look on his face, it was clear he had decided to side with his mother. That night, Sean didn't come home. I wondered if he was avoiding me or if he just didn't care anymore. Still, I needed to make sure something like this didn't happen again, so I called Sean. "Hello, Sean?" "Ah, hello." Sean sounded reluctant to talk. "Please tell me your mother's actions today were a joke. If she starts living in the store, it will be ruined instantly. You know this store depends on customer trust. If your mother tries anything strange again, you must stop her. Do you understand?" Sean didn't respond and hung up. Seeing his reaction, I realized something. Sean couldn't resist his mother's constant pressure and had chosen to stand by her. It seemed easier for him to give in to his mother than to stand up for us. But this meant my store was in real danger. I was deeply troubled. How could I protect the store I love? I spent the night worrying, and before I knew it, it was morning. The next day was a day off for my salon, but I had a bad feeling, so I went to the store. While I was cleaning, a large truck suddenly stopped in front of the store. I rushed outside to see movers starting to unload furniture and prepare to bring it inside. When I asked the workers, they confirmed that my mother-in-law had requested this, and they were trying to bring her furniture into the store. "Please wait, I cannot accept this here," I firmly protested, but the workers didn't stop. They were just doing their job and had to complete the work they were hired to do. I managed to convince the workers to pause temporarily and quickly called for help. The workers were confused by the interruption and seemed to be contacting my mother-in-law. It looked like she and Sean would be arriving soon. Eventually, my mother-in-law and Sean showed up. "Why are you getting in my way? Since I said I'm going to live here, I'll take everything unnecessary outside and quickly bring in my stuff," my mother-in-law ordered. "That's right, Mom is going to live here starting today," Sean added with a chuckle. Even though they were confused, the workers began following her orders to move things outside. "Stop doing as you please," I shouted. Just then, a black luxury car stopped behind the truck. A large man in a double-striped suit and a stylish hat stepped out of the car. His commanding presence was immediately noticeable. He was clearly no ordinary person. The man approached with a deep voice. "What's all this commotion? Isn't this disturbing the neighborhood? Shelley, are you having some trouble?" "Yes, I am. These people are trying to take over my shop and live here," I responded. Hearing this, the man looked towards my mother-in-law and Sean and calmly asked, "It seems there is some sort of trouble here. Is there a reason for this?" Overwhelmed by the man's presence, my mother-in-law hesitated. "What are you talking about? Don't meddle in family matters. This woman is my daughter-in-law, so what's the problem with moving into her house?" At that moment, the man gently removed his hat and said, "I see that's what this is about. My daughter has always been well taken care of by you. I hear about it often. Sean, it's been a long time," he said with a warm smile. "Father-in-law?" Sean stepped back in surprise. This man was, in fact, my father. His appearance was far from ordinary, and Sean had always been intimidated by my family. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, just a meeting between the families, and since then, my father and my mother-in-law hadn't met. At that meeting, my mother-in-law and Sean were so intimidated by my father's presence that they left quickly without much conversation, and it seemed my mother-in-law didn't remember his face. "Father-in-law, it's been a while," my mother-in-law said, sweating profusely. "No, I haven't caused any trouble. I just brought some belongings because I thought I could live in Shelley's shop. I haven't caused trouble for anyone," she explained, trying to act innocent while urging the workers to continue. "You intend to live here?" "I can't permit that," my father said sternly. "I own this building. The first floor is rented out as Shelley's aesthetic salon, and my daughter and I have a formal contract as the landlords and business operators. It is not allowed to use this place as a residence. If violated, you will need to vacate immediately." "I've just witnessed a violation. According to the contract, you must vacate immediately," my father said with a piercing gaze. I could feel the overwhelming authority in his eyes. "I understand. I can't make any excuses for this violation. We will vacate immediately," I responded. My father nodded and turned his gaze to my mother-in-law and Sean. "As you heard, I've agreed with the tenant to terminate the lease. If you enter here again, I'll have to call the police. You are now outsiders. Please leave this place." Saying that, he led me inside the shop, and we closed the shutter in front of them. My mother-in-law and Sean stood there, dazed for a while, but soon I could hear them arguing with the movers. The movers, needing to rush to their next job, eventually left the belongings on the roadside and departed. "Sean, handle this for now. Bring it to our apartment," my mother-in-law instructed. Sean, following her orders, quickly arranged a rental car and began transporting the belongings. Watching through a gap in the shutter, I said, "It turned out just as expected. They're heading to our apartment." "I'm glad I acted promptly. Thank you, Dad." My father's stern demeanor softened, and he smiled. Maybe I went a bit too far. Despite his intimidating appearance, my father is actually a very kind person. He dresses this way because he loves gangster films, but he's usually just a friendly local real estate agent. They're sure to be surprised when they arrive at the apartment. We chuckled quietly to ourselves. In reality, all the furniture and household items from the apartment had already been removed, leaving only Sean's personal belongings behind. After a while, my mother-in-law called, clearly distressed. "What happened? The room is empty. Where is the furniture?" Her voice was agitated and angry. I responded calmly, "I have terminated the apartment lease. I was the leaseholder and I made the payments, so it was within my rights to cancel it. The apartment is owned by my father, and we plan to dispose of any remaining belongings as abandoned property and change the locks soon. If you don't collect the personal items quickly, you'll have to meet my father again." Her voice trembled upon hearing my father's name. "So, where have you moved to? Let us come there. Won't you let us stay with you?" I answered with a snort, "I've just decided to divorce Sean, and we will not live together anymore. I recently told Sean that if you interfere with my shop, I would seek a divorce. He agreed, and I've kept his response as evidence. Due to the influence of you and Sean, I can no longer continue my aesthetic business in this building. Therefore, based on the agreement with Sean, I am proceeding with a divorce. As for the furniture, it belonged to me before our marriage, and it is only natural that I take it all." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law began yelling at Sean, who was next to her. "How can you so easily agree to such a serious decision as divorce?" The situation obviously required proper handling. I could hear Sean exclaim in surprise, "You shouldn't prolong this issue. Look for a new place to live instead," I told them before ending the call. Afterward, my mother-in-law and Sean struggled to find a new home and eventually had to rent a house from distant relatives. Sean's commute became difficult, and he quit his job to work part-time at a rural deli while scrambling to pay off his mother's debts. Meanwhile, I was able to move into a property owned by my father immediately. As for the termination of the aesthetic shop's lease, it was actually part of a plan, and in reality, the business continues to operate as before. Now the popularity of my aesthetic shop has grown significantly, and it's become so sought after that reservations are difficult to secure, even attracting celebrities. We warmly welcome male clients, and I regularly provide various beauty treatments for my father. Although he is nearing 70, the regular care at our shop has rejuvenated his skin, making him feel a bit closer to the actor he has always admired. Through these experiences, I've come to realize again that the essence of my job is to give each client confidence. The memory of my first free aesthetic treatment when I was in high school remains vivid, and the excitement and fresh feelings from that day continue to inspire my daily work. That experience taught me what I should offer through my interactions with many customers. I also think about Sean occasionally. If he had more self-confidence, perhaps a different future could have been possible for him. Despite being so close to me, it was difficult to provide him with the right support. His situation has taught me how challenging it can be to offer objective help due to closeness. If, in the future, Sean visits our aesthetic shop, I plan to interact with him impartially and spare no effort in supporting him to maximize his potential confidence. If I can give him the courage to take a new step forward, I believe it would be profoundly meaningful. My name is Stella, and I'm in my 30s. I'm a widow, and right now I'm dealing with a problem. I just realized that $100 is missing. I checked my wallet over and over, searched my bag thoroughly, but I can't find it anywhere. This morning, I withdrew $11,000 for living expenses, so I know I'm not just forgetting. I sigh and hold my head, feeling frustrated. I live with my in-laws, and we support each other after the loss of my husband. 3 years ago, I became the chief mourner when my husband passed away from cancer. He was young, and we were planning to build a happy family with children, but his death was sudden. I loved him deeply. Even in his last moments, he tried to comfort me, saying, "Leave it to me." Though he was in pain, he still smiled. After he died, life felt empty, like I was just existing. My in-laws shared this pain. They were suffering too. At the funeral, my father-in-law quietly said, "Dying before one's parents, what a shameful thing," and bit his lip to hold back tears. We've been living together since then, like animals huddling together for warmth. My relationship with my in-laws is good. They even encouraged me to find new love, saying, "You're still young and cute. You can meet someone wonderful." I thanked them but told them that I still loved my husband. They said they'd support me even if I found someone new. My in-laws worry about me because I became a widow in my 20s. When I mentioned that I wanted to start working, they encouraged me, saying, "You don't have to overdo it. We'll manage as a family." But after losing my husband, our financial situation became unstable. We hadn't planned for him to get cancer at such a young age, and our savings, meant for building a house, quickly ran out. Now I rely on a survivor's pension and help from my in-laws, but I can't be satisfied with this situation, so I decided to start a part-time job. A few months after I started working, I noticed money was missing. At first, it was just a few $10 bills, but then it became $100 and eventually $200. Since there are only 3 people in the house, me and my in-laws, and my father-in-law is away at work during the day, I started to suspect my mother-in-law. But she's always so kind, saying things like, "I'll make dinner tonight so you can relax." I didn't want to believe she could do something like this. One day, I left my purse with $70 and set up my smartphone to record. The video clearly showed my mother-in-law taking the money without hesitation. I realized she might be stealing to support herself. She often tries to cheer me up, suggesting we go shopping or try popular desserts, but I can tell she's forcing herself to be happy, likely because she's still grieving her son. I understand her grief all too well, so I can't bring myself to blame her. I'm still in my 20s and have some energy left, so I decided to work more until my mother-in-law can find peace. That's why I started working late at night, where the pay is better. It's mid-November now, and the nights are getting colder. Soon, it will be a year since my husband passed away. I remember how he suddenly suggested, "Shall we go to the store to buy ice cream?" in the middle of the night. We walked down the quiet street, holding hands. His hand was large, thick, and very warm. Even though he had become quite thin before he passed away, the warmth of his hand never changed. Now I put my cold hands in my pockets and hurried to the store. The store where I work at night is usually quiet but still busy, even though only 2 people work there. As I was checking expiration dates on products, I sensed someone approaching. "Ah, the register, sorry." I turned around quickly, and to my surprise, my father-in-law was standing there, dressed in a suit despite the late hour. "You've been working part-time?" he asked. He had assumed my frequent nighttime outings were because I had a new lover, but that wasn't the case. It seems he misunderstood, thinking I was keeping a new relationship secret. He had dressed up and followed me, intending to meet the person he thought was making me happy and ask them, "Please make Stella happy." When I replied, "I still love him," my father-in-law murmured with a voice full of both joy and sadness, "I see." Then he asked what I expected. "Why are you working at night? Aren't you making enough money? You work during the day too." When I hesitated, he pressed further with more questions. I had kept my late-night job a secret from both of my in-laws because I didn't want to explain the situation with my mother-in-law. I had been sneaking out quietly while they slept, but I was surprised he had found out. Realizing I couldn't keep it hidden any longer, I pulled out my smartphone and showed him the video. I confessed everything, when the thefts started, how often they happened, and how much money had been stolen. I also mentioned that it might be due to the loneliness of losing their son. My father-in-law listened silently and then said with difficulty, "I've caused trouble." I replied, "It's okay, we're all suffering." He then said, with tears running down his cheeks, "We were blessed with such a wonderful daughter-in-law, and to almost lose her so quickly is truly, truly foolish." I couldn't hold back my own tears, even though I was at work. "Father, the coffee here is really good. Would you like to try some? I'm about to take a break. Would you join me?" I invited him. "Yes, that would be nice," he replied, turning away to wipe his eyes with his sleeve. We sat together near the bicycle parking area of the store, drinking coffee. The sky was clear, and the night was beautiful, with the full moon lighting up the darkness. "Don't you think the winter night sky is the most beautiful?" I asked. "Exactly," he said. "That's why we should go camping during the winter break, to a place where the stars are beautiful." It was a plan my husband would have made. "All right, I'll look up some places," I said. I replied that it was a plan we both would have liked, but I was sure my husband was enjoying the most beautiful starry sky from the best seat in heaven. With that thought, I looked up at the sky. Suddenly, my father-in-law gasped in surprise. I followed his gaze and saw my mother-in-law walking happily with a man I didn't know. They were walking arm in arm. "Quiet, let's go back to the store right away," I said, feeling nervous. It was clear we saw something we shouldn't have. My heart started pounding, not just a little, but a lot. The way they were together made it seem like there was something inappropriate going on. My father-in-law seemed to sense it too. His face looked serious. They weren't just arm in arm. They looked like they were about to kiss, walking very close together. He sighed and said, "It seems you weren't the only one going out late at night." My wife couldn't sleep either, thinking of our son, and she was also going out at night. I thought she couldn't escape the sadness, so I let her be. He paused, trying to find the right words. "But maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe she just ran into someone she knew while walking." I felt disappointed in my weak attempt to make it sound okay, but my father-in-law smiled and thanked me anyway. The air between us felt even more uncomfortable, and the cheerful music playing in the store made it worse. My father-in-law suddenly muttered, "I see, that's what it is." He nodded like he understood something, but I was still confused. I looked at him, full of questions. He said, "Stella, let's keep what happened tonight between us and not tell my wife. I'll handle this. And if my wife takes your money again, please let me know secretly." "Yes, I understand," I replied. "Don't worry about anything, Stella," he said firmly, gently patting my head. A few weeks later, on a Sunday after lunch, he said, "There's something I need to discuss. Stella, please join us as a witness." My mother-in-law asked, "What's wrong? Why the serious face?" My father-in-law waited for us to sit down, then took several papers out of a brown envelope and spread them on the table. My mother-in-law quickly grabbed one of the sheets. It was a large photo of her and a man entering a hotel. My father-in-law had hired a detective to find out what my mother-in-law was doing. "Are you still seeing him?" he asked. My mother-in-law just stared back at him angrily without answering. Curiosity got the best of me, so I asked, "What do you mean by still?" My father-in-law was silent for a while before he quietly started telling the story. "Actually, this was before our son was born," he began. "Right after marrying my father-in-law, my mother-in-law gave in to temptation from outside the marriage. The man we saw at the store was the same one involved back then. My mother-in-law and that man were high school classmates, and they reconnected at a reunion. They had been close in high school and admitted to each other that they had feelings for each other back then. Although my mother-in-law was already married, he was single and attractive. According to my father-in-law, she thought it was the perfect chance to leave her marriage since they didn't have children yet. However, the problem was that the man didn't have a promising future. He was good-looking and dreamed of becoming a famous actor, even starting his own theater group. But there were hardly any members, and most of the performances were just him alone. Torn between reality and dreams, my mother-in-law chose the stable life my father-in-law could offer over the uncertain dreams of her former classmate, giving up the idea of running away with him. But in the end, my mother-in-law couldn't make a choice and lived a double life between my father-in-law and that man. At that time, I was so busy with work that I didn't notice what was happening at home. My father-in-law said with a sad look, giving my mother-in-law a cold stare. He found out about the affair when there was a chance she could be pregnant. Even when she might have been pregnant, she didn't seem truly happy. I started to get suspicious and looked into it, discovering that she had been involved with that man. But my mother-in-law desperately insisted. "Our son is really yours truly." She had made the same plea in the past, promising to break up with the man immediately and never see him again. She wanted to build a life with my father-in-law, and he believed her. He thought it was just a brief affair, but it was much more serious. When we saw them at the store, it was clear why my father-in-law's expression became so stern. And to think you've continued this relationship all along. It's truly disgraceful, he said. No, that's not true, she replied, but their relationship looked like they had been together for years. My father-in-law slammed the report on the table, and the undeniable evidence was clear. My mother-in-law tried to argue, but she looked downcast. It's true. I'm not lying. I hadn't been in touch with him at all. I didn't even know his contact information. Then why were you together? My father-in-law pressed. He came to our son's funeral. My mother-in-law answered. What? My father-in-law exclaimed in surprise. Maybe you called him because he's the real father. That's not true. Our child is really yours. He just came for the funeral, she insisted. I see. Really, I was just lonely after our son died. I just wanted to see him again. But I didn't know his contact, so I looked up his stage name on the internet and found his theater group's email address. So you started seeing each other again? Because I couldn't help it. I was tormented by our son's memory. I wanted to be free too, she said, turning to me. Stella, you understand, don't you? My mother-in-law pleaded, but I was speechless, frozen in shock as I learned about my in-law's past. How much had my husband known about all of this? Thinking of him made my heart ache as my mother-in-law kept trying to defend herself. My father-in-law just shook his head in disbelief. No matter how believable your story sounds, I won't fall for it anymore. I won't be deceived again, he declared. What do you mean by deceiving? I'm telling the truth, my mother-in-law protested. Just lonely because our son is gone. Is that the real reason? My father-in-law questioned. It's true. Why would you say that? She retorted loudly, but my father-in-law calmly looked her in the eyes. Stella, the money stolen from your purse went to that man's drinking and gambling, he said quietly. What? I was shocked. Have you been giving Stella's earnings to this man? He asked. My mother-in-law didn't answer, but her expression said it all. It was true. Stella knew you were taking the money, but despite that, she thought you were suffering and showed compassion. Now apologize to Stella, my father-in-law demanded. I'm sorry, my mother-in-law said, apologizing. Emotions overwhelmed me, and I couldn't stop crying, though I didn't even know what kind of tears they were. Everything felt out of control. And you promised at the bar you frequent that you'd marry him after I died? Laughing about it. You even said you'd build a house with my retirement fund. My father-in-law added. That must be a joke, right? My mother-in-law responded. I can't believe a parent who has lost a child would joke about a family member's death. My father-in-law said, raising his voice. There had been rumors that my mother-in-law wished for my father-in-law's death. It was unbelievable. Unable to bear it any longer, I rushed out of the living room and curled up in the hallway, wiping away my unending tears. From beyond the hallway, I could hear my father-in-law's anguished voice through the living room door. You must have been happy to see him after our son died. I don't want to see your face anymore. Leave right now, he yelled. Later, they divorced. I don't know if my mother-in-law is with that man anymore. It no longer concerns me. My father-in-law returned the money my mother-in-law had taken from me and said, Don't worry, I'll also get compensation from her. But the amount I lost wasn't much. It's compensation for you, Stella. Don't worry about it. Legally, you are my daughter, he said with a laugh. His kindness always warmed my heart. Can I stay here until I find new love? I asked. Of course, my father-in-law responded with a big smile. I wondered what my husband would think about this decision, and the question suddenly crossed my mind. Hey Stella, can I ask you one thing? Don't you ever think there's no blood relation between me and my son? What do you actually think? My father-in-law asked hesitantly. This must have been weighing on his mind for a long time. His face was tense with anxiety. He had raised his son alone, unable to confide in anyone. I looked him straight in the eye and answered lightly, Oh, was that what you were worried about? That was it, he replied. I couldn't help but laugh. Of course you are father and son. Remember what you said at the store, Stella, you don't have to worry about anything. Leave it all to me. His way of speaking and his actions are so much like yours, it's as if he was possessed by you. No doubt you are a real father and son, I guarantee it. Hearing those words, my father-in-law started to cry, his emotions finally collapsing. Thank you, really thank you, he said, and I gently rubbed his back. Father, thank you for raising him so wonderfully. At that moment, my father-in-law took my hand and squeezed it tightly. His hand was as warm as his son's.
This is going to be our home now. The rest of the stuff is coming today, so please take care of it. What? Why are you making these decisions on your own? Oh, by the way, Anna is coming too, so make sure to welcome her. I had noticed that my husband's family started visiting more often after we moved into the fancy high-rise condo, but I never expected anything like this. As soon as my husband came home from work, I asked him, "Is your mother and her family going to live here?" "Oh yeah, that's happening today, isn't it?" he replied casually. "What are you talking about?" I was shocked. "Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today." "Haha," he laughed, not realizing how upset I was. I was speechless. "Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today." At that point, I was furious. How could he think this was okay? "We can live here because of me, you know," I said. "What are you talking about?" "That's not true," he argued back. As we were talking, my mother-in-law arrived. "If you hate living with us so much, why don't you just leave?" she said, throwing an envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "It's severance money from us, $110,000. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll keep the house," she said, smirking with her family. At that moment, I made up my mind. They're such fools. I'm so lucky, I thought. "Understood. I'll leave right away," I said. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, feeling overjoyed. But this wasn't the end. I couldn't stop laughing, thinking about what would happen to my in-laws next. My name is Sarah, and I work as a bank employee. I thought I would have a happy life married to Kevin, but marriage doesn't always go as planned. I realized this when I first met my mother-in-law. "So, you're Sarah. What do you do for a living?" "I'm a bank employee," I replied. "Oh, a bank employee, huh? I guess you don't have to be too smart to do that," she said, clearly trying to put me down. This happened the first time we met before the wedding. Kevin, sitting next to me, acted like he didn't hear and just smoked his cigarette. "Well, let's get along from now on," she said. Yes, nice to meet you," I replied, wondering if everything would be okay. But after we got married, my husband was kind, and we didn't have to interact much with my mother-in-law. "Are you sure it was a good idea to marry a man with such a modest salary?" she asked out of nowhere one day. "What's wrong all of a sudden?" I asked. "Well, my mom used to say such things, but now I just feel pathetic." "It's okay, don't worry," I assured him. Kevin had always been insecure, even when we were dating. He was intimidated when he found out I was a bank employee, but I never cared much about my partner's financial status. Since then, we've had a modest but fun life. "What are you planning to do about where we live?" my father asked me a few months after we got married. "I think we're fine as we are now. We don't have any particular needs," I replied. "Actually, a spot has opened up in the high-rise condo. What do you think?" he asked. A high-rise condo? I was surprised. My father owned a high-rise condo. He was a company president, but had handed over the business to my brother and was now living a relaxed life. Of course, my husband knew about this. "If you're interested, you can move in immediately." "Got it. I'll discuss it with Kevin," I said. I talked to Kevin that night. "Kevin, are you interested in living in a high-rise condo?" "A high-rise condo? It would be amazing to live in such a place," Kevin said, showing excitement I hadn't seen before. Seeing him smile made me happy too. "Actually, my dad offered us to live in the high-rise condo." "Really?" "Yes," I replied. Kevin, overwhelmed with excitement, suddenly grabbed my shoulders. "Calm down a bit." Sorry, he said, realizing how excited he was. And so it was decided that we would live in the high-rise condo. However, for me, it was the beginning of a nightmare. "I'll contact Dad then, okay," I said. "Thanks, but I can't believe I'm going to live in a high-rise condo." Kevin's eyes sparkled. After getting Kevin's approval, I called my dad the next day. "Hello, Dad," Kevin agreed, so we decided to move in. "That's great. It's already cleaned and ready for you anytime." "Got it. Thank you," I replied. Then I remembered something important and asked my father, "By the way, how will we handle the rent?" "Don't worry about that. As long as you live there, you won't need to pay rent." "Really?" "Of course, it's all for my dear daughter." My husband and I started preparing to move right away. We moved in just 1 week later. Perhaps we were both excited to live in the high-rise condo. So this is a high-rise condo. It's incredible. "I never imagined we could live in such a place," Kevin said. "It's like a dream, all thanks to your father." "Indeed, we need to express our gratitude," Kevin replied. Although we were initially confused by the larger space of the high-rise condo, it only took a week to get used to it. I had concerns about whether someone like me should live there, but those concerns faded away. About 2 months after we started living in the high-rise condo, Kevin said, "My sister Anna wants to come visit. Is that okay?" Kevin had an older sister named Anna. I heard from Kevin that she had been married but got divorced because she was fed up with her husband and had returned to her parents' home. That's fine, but why does she want to come here? I asked. I hadn't really talked much with her before, so I didn't quite understand why she wanted to visit. I mentioned our new place, and she said she wanted to come over. That's fine as long as it's on the weekend, I replied. I'll let her know then. When Saturday arrived, the doorbell rang, and I went to open it. Standing there was a woman dressed head to toe in designer clothes. I was so surprised that I stepped back. It's been a while. Do you remember me? She asked. Of course, Anna. Please, come in. My sister-in-law walked in and started looking around the house, inspecting every corner. She checked each room, nodding like she was satisfied with something. Is there something on your mind? I asked, curious. I was just admiring the house. Ordinary people can't live in such a place, right? It's all thanks to my father, I explained. We moved to the living room and started chatting casually. Then, out of nowhere, my sister-in-law made a snide remark. At the time, I didn't understand why she said that. It must be nice to be you, Sarah. Don't you think so, Kevin? I don't really think about it, Kevin replied. But this house is all thanks to your father-in-law, right? I felt uneasy and asked, did I do something wrong? Not at all. It's just that our family wasn't wealthy, she replied. Kevin had told me before that their father had passed away when they were in middle school, and since then they had faced many hardships. I started to think maybe she was jealous of me. That might be why she was wearing all those designer clothes. Well, I'll be going now. I'll visit again soon. Take care. For about 2 hours, the conversation mainly revolved around their hardships and how lucky I was. Kevin barely spoke during the whole time, just silently listening to his sister. I'm sorry my sister is like that, Kevin said afterward. I kind of figured, I replied. I'll make sure to warn her next time, Kevin promised, but less than a month later, she visited us again, and this time she wasn't alone. Sorry for intruding, she said, barging in and plopping down on the sofa. Today I brought our mom along, but the door was locked. Oh, Kevin gave me a spare key, she said casually. What? I was shocked. I wanted to ask Kevin about it immediately, but he wasn't home. I had a bad feeling this was going to cause trouble. Then the most difficult person spoke up. It's not that big of a deal. What's the problem with having a spare key? The issue is that I wasn't informed about it, I replied. Maybe Kevin doesn't trust you, my mother-in-law said. I think so too, Anna chimed in. With both of them against me, I felt helpless. From that day on, my life became completely different. When I came home from work, I often found my sister-in-law and mother-in-law in the house. They would help themselves to the food in the fridge and move things around without asking. This isn't right, don't you think? I asked Kevin. Even if I say something, they won't listen. Maybe it's best to just let them do what they want, Kevin said. I can't stand living like this. Please talk to them. I was so frustrated with my husband for doing nothing and with myself for feeling powerless. Okay, I'll talk to them. Will you be there with me? Kevin asked. If you're going to speak up properly, then I don't mind, I replied. As usual, when my husband confronted them, they didn't pay any attention. Sarah must have put you up to this, right? Come on, Kevin, be more assertive, they said. That's right, you're the head of the household. You should have your own opinions, they added. My husband seemed to be thinking about something, looking down. Don't say weird things. Please leave, I finally told them. But then my husband unexpectedly turned against me. You're the one who should be quiet, he said. I was shocked. My husband was siding against me. He had completely given in to his mother and sister. They took advantage of Kevin's lack of confidence and his inability to say no. Now, I felt completely alone. I was wrong, my husband said with a new sense of confidence. What my sister and mother said is right. From now on, I'm going to express my own opinions. The two of them smirked and looked at us with satisfaction. From then on, things became one-sided. I've decided that my mom and sister can come and go as they please, my husband declared. Wait, you can't just make decisions like that without me, I protested. The decision is made, and you have no say in it, he replied, ignoring my concerns. His mother and sister backed him up. Sarah, that's enough, they said. Kevin is the head of this household. As his wife, you just need to follow him. There's a spare room, right? My mother-in-law asked. No way, I responded, but they continued. It's a waste to have an unused room, so we'll use it. The balance of power had clearly shifted in their favor. The room, which my father had allowed us to use, was now considered theirs. Given the situation, I had no choice but to tough it out. I decided to focus on my work and not worry about what was happening at home. 6 months later, my dedication to work paid off. You've been doing really well lately. How about taking on a higher position? My boss asked. Me? I've been watching your work, and I think you're the right person for the job. Thank you. I'll continue to do my best. It was unexpected but the happiest thing that had happened to me in a long time. However, there was a problem. You've been coming home late recently. What have you been up to? My husband asked suspiciously. Just work, really. Aren't you having an affair? If you don't believe me, go ahead and check, I replied. This was when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would chime in. Getting so defensive makes you look even more suspicious, Anna said. Anna might be right, my mother-in-law added, but honestly, who would be interested in Sarah with her looks? They clapped their hands and laughed together, enjoying themselves at my expense. Before, they used to come over maybe 3 times a week, but now they were at our house almost every day. One day, my mother-in-law came up to me and said something completely unexpected. Do you even understand why you can live in a place like this? A woman like you doesn't belong here. I thought to myself, there she goes again. You can't even do household chores properly. You're useless here, do you get that? She continued. I wanted to snap back, but I knew that nothing I said would improve the situation, so I stayed silent. Eventually, my mother-in-law got bored and went back to her room. Just as I was about to start preparing dinner, my sister-in-law walked in. I heard the conversation earlier. There's never a moment of peace. You should really understand your place. You're like a maid in this house. I work hard too, you know, and I might sound bad, but I earn more than Kevin, I said. Then you should contribute that money to the household expenses for us, she shot back. I couldn't agree with her. I wasn't living in luxury. I was actually paying for most of our daily expenses like utilities and groceries. Kevin seemed to have forgotten that, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't even know the reality. I often wondered what would happen if I stopped paying. Then why don't you work, Anna? I asked. Why should I have to do that? She replied, completely serious. I almost envied her ability to say such things. It was a mystery where she went every day without working. So where do you go every day? I asked. I don't need to tell you that, she said, avoiding eye contact. It was clear she was involved in something she couldn't openly talk about. Is that so? Then I'll just assume you're wandering around every day without working, I said seriously. Angered, my sister-in-law threw a mug from the table at me. It didn't hit me, but the mug shattered into pieces. Why did you dodge that? That was my favorite cup. Since it's your fault, clean it up, she demanded. I silently began cleaning up the broken pieces while she stood there watching and laughing. I thought about throwing the shards back at her, but I refrained. You're in the way standing there, she said. I'm just watching, she added as I cleaned up. After a few minutes, I tried to leave, but my sister-in-law stopped me again. Remember, if you say something weird next time, it'll be much worse. I understand. I'll be careful, I said, though I didn't mean it inside. As I watched my sister-in-law leave, I thought to myself, don't get too cocky, you'll get what's coming to you soon. Then one day, as usual, when I returned home from shopping, the house was in chaos. There were cardboard boxes everywhere and my mother-in-law was bustling around. What are you doing? I asked. This is going to be our home now. The rest of our stuff is arriving today, so please take care of it, she said. What? Why are you deciding this on your own? I asked, shocked. Oh, by the way, Anna will be coming too. Please welcome her. I immediately asked my husband, who had just returned from work, your mother and her family are saying they're going to live here. Oh yeah, that was today, wasn't it? What are you talking about? Huh? Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today, he said, laughing. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't think of what to say next. Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today, he added. At those words, my anger reached its peak. How can this be allowed? After all, we can live here thanks to me? Huh? What are you talking about? That's not true, he replied. Are you serious? You're just obeying everything your family says, I said. What did you say? Say that again, my husband said, raising his hand toward me. At that moment, it wasn't fear that I felt. I was shocked at how much my husband had changed, going from unassertive to someone who might hit me. But I wasn't scared, I was in disbelief. Go ahead, hit me if you dare, I said. He slowly lowered his arm, apparently intimidated, but then started laughing. What's so funny? I asked. I just remembered why we got married. You should be thankful you could marry me, he replied, laughing. What are you talking about? You might not know this, but I married you because nobody else was interested. I didn't marry you out of love. It's annoying, but I did it because you earn more than me. That's what Mom told me to do, he said. Anger boiled up inside me. So that was the reason, I thought. He continued, since you're married to someone like me, it's only natural for you to contribute to the living expenses. Ever since we got married, I had always been the one providing the money whenever needed. I never thought my husband was such a terrible person. That's mutual. You only bring home money. I never thought you could be so boring, he retorted. As we argued, my mother-in-law arrived. If you hate living together so much, why don't you just leave? She said. Why should I have to do that? I asked. We don't need someone like you in this place, she said. My sister-in-law agreed. Sarah is unnecessary. Nothing will change if you're gone. My mother-in-law then threw an envelope on the table. What is this? I asked. It's severance money from us. There's $10,000 in the envelope. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll take the house, she said, smirking. At that moment, I made up my mind. The high-rise condo we were living in was technically in my name, though I was only borrowing it for free from my father. I thought of a way to retaliate against them. Such foolish people, I thought. This is an opportunity for me. I decided to act immediately. Understood. I'll leave right away, I said. I thought you would put up more of a fight, my husband sneered. Well, that's the kind of woman she was. Too bad, but I don't want to see your face anymore, so leave quickly, my mother-in-law added. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, almost dancing with glee. I couldn't stop laughing as I imagined what would happen to my in-laws next. I decided to go back to my parents' house to inform my father about the situation. Why have you come back suddenly? My father asked. I've been kicked out of the house, I replied. Kicked out? How did that happen? He asked, concerned. I explained everything that had happened that day and the events leading up to it. My father's face turned red with anger as I spoke. After I finished, he was angrier than I had ever seen him. Let's kick them out immediately, he said, but I stopped him. Wait, Dad. I have a better idea, I said. What kind of idea? He asked. I shared the plan I had thought of when leaving the house. My father nodded in agreement. That's a brilliant idea, right? This way it benefits you as well, and I get my revenge. So you'll take care of it. Yes, don't worry, he assured me. The next day, I contacted my husband about the apartment. I have no intention of giving it back, I told him. I know, but the ownership is still mine, so I'm thinking of transferring it to you. Then it will truly be yours, right? I see. I don't want to cause you any trouble. I'll handle the paperwork. Is that okay? Okay, I'll leave it to you, he agreed. All right, I'll also send the divorce papers by mail. Take care, I said, hanging up the phone. I could sense my husband's joy just before I hung up. A week later, the divorce was finalized and the paperwork for the high-rise condo was completed. All that was left was to wait. Hey, I got a bill for $6,000. What's the meaning of this? Explain. My furious ex-husband called me a month later. It was hard to suppress my laughter at his reaction. Well, it's a high-rise condo, you know. Did you think you could live there for free? But the rent was free until now, wasn't it? Indeed, when I was there, I laughed. This is no joke, he shouted so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was free because I was there. But now that it's yours, you need to pay the rent. We're not going to pay that. You can choose not to, but remember, the owner of the apartment is my father, I reminded him. After a moment of silence, my mother-in-law took the phone. I heard from Kevin what you did. That was unnecessary of you. Unnecessary? I believe what I did was entirely justified. Please don't be mistaken, I responded. What an impudent woman you are, she said angrily. It doesn't matter to me. Haha. You shouldn't have given me $10,000 then, I provoked her. I thought I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore, but my words got to her. We will absolutely not pay, she said. Is that so? That's fine by me, but don't say I didn't warn you if my father decides to sue, I replied. My mother-in-law seemed shaken, losing her previous confidence. Aren't you ashamed to rely on your father? Not at all. It's more shameful for someone who tried to manipulate their son to their own ends, don't you think? I said. Realizing she was at a disadvantage, my mother-in-law abruptly hung up the phone. She was just running away. I immediately informed my father about the conversation. I see that I need to do something about it for my daughter, he said. I'm counting on you, I replied. My former in-laws acted impulsively, thinking only of their convenience, and this was the result. Such a pitiful family. They would face more difficulties from now on, and I would just wait and enjoy watching. Time passed, and my ex-husband and his family continued living in the high-rise condo without paying rent. Eventually, my father had to take action. I just billed them for the past due rent, he said. Really? We can't ignore this any longer. It will be a good lesson for them, I replied. Then a new revelation came to light. There were traces of unauthorized purchases made with a credit card in my name. A lawyer introduced by my father was hired, and preparations for a lawsuit began, demanding reimbursement from my ex-husband and his family. Why should we pay you? My sister-in-law objected, mostly because the purchases were expensive branded bags and clothes. How can you say that after shopping with someone else's money? This is clear theft, I said. It's pathetic to fuss over such trivial matters. Besides, those purchases were made before your divorce, so I think they're invalid, she argued. Unfortunately, that logic doesn't apply. You and I are strangers now, I said. I don't care about that, she replied, but then she hung up, escaping as usual. However, they couldn't escape this time and had to make the payment. They must pay the rent for the apartment, but that family doesn't have the means to pay. One person eventually came begging for forgiveness. What are you saying now? We can't afford to pay such an amount. We'd be ruined even if we took out loans. You understand, right? My mother-in-law was trying to get sympathy through tears. It's all your responsibility. Aren't you ashamed? I asked, knowing she was fully aware of the situation. It's impossible. Please make sure to pay the full amount, I insisted. Afterward, it seems they continued to live in poverty. The three of them, having lost their place to live, returned to their old family home, which was in a dilapidated state due to neglect. Eventually, they realized they needed more money to live and decided to sell it for a cheap price. Sarah, please help me. I received a call from my ex-husband Kevin, but I ignored it and hung up. In the end, I was able to live in the high-rise condo they had left. Of course, I didn't have to pay any rent. My work was going well, and from now on, I would live my life putting my happiness first.